Graduates of Wyoming Catholic College, I want to congratulate you. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and I am in beautiful, sweet home, Alabama. We have tall trees, and they're all very green, and still plenty of flowers blossoming all over the area. This is not Wyoming, but I wish I were with you in Wyoming. I very much dislike not getting a chance to meet you and see your college. I have done 2 programs about Wyoming Catholic, and it would have been a tremendous privilege for me to be able to meet with you and get to know your campus, and if possible, get out there and ride some of the horses that y'all have out there. I love to ride horses. In fact, from the time I can possibly remember, the first thing I ever wanted to be was a cowboy. And then when I was 8, I felt the call to the priesthood. But I never ever lost that desire to be a cowboy. And I was truly looking forward to getting out to Wyoming. So it's a sadness for me not to be physically present, as I'm sure it is for you too. At the same time, you are graduating anyway, and that you are able to move on to the next stage of life. And I remember one person who had called into my shows after I'd announced I was speaking at a graduation for another Catholic college. And this gentleman said, "Why do they call it graduation? They should call it commencement." And I told him, well, actually they do. They call it both. And there is a reason for this to be the case. One, you are finishing a very important stage of your career. That's the graduation part. You're moving up a step, a grade. And this graduation indicates the successful accomplishment with a lot of hard work to go past where you've been. And that's a good thing. But it is also a commencement. You are about to begin a new stage of life. And that is also good, if not in some ways more important than finishing the old step. You are, for the most of you anyway, you are very much at the beginning of a long section of your lives. From this point on, each of you has about another 55 years if you live the average life expectancy. And you may have more, some of you will have less. That's life. And got to deal with that part of reality as well. But you don't plan on a short life. Most of us don't. You plan on a long haul. And this is extremely important to keep in mind. The previous years of education for you, this would be probably on the average 16 years of education, from grammar school all the way up to high school, now university. And these are extremely important tools, and you're doing exactly the right thing for your stage of life. This is the time when your brain is growing. As a matter of fact, for most of you, it's may still growing a little bit, may grow another year or two, and then it'll be fully formed, especially that frontal cortex. And during this time of the physical development of your brain, you are also absorbing all kinds of knowledge. Hopefully you are filling it up with lots of things. And when I did the programs on your college, I was super impressed with the way that the administrators who came to visit me described the quality of education you got. The idea of reading the great books instead of textbooks is so wonderful. And it is something that I encourage people to do more of. I frankly find a lot of the textbooks wanting. Some places it's necessary. But you have had this tremendous privilege of being able to delve into great and wonderful literature of the history of the world and then argue through it. Learn how to think with all of these great books. That gift for that style of education cannot be underestimated. When I look back on my own career, the programs or the courses that I appreciated the most were the ones when the professors required us to read primary sources. That would especially have been my course on St. Augustine, where we read in a semester 1,200 pages of Augustine. And in a course on, and that was undergrad, by the way, and then in seminary, the course I had on the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation was loaded with reading the actual sources, Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, and the other reformers, and the Counter-Reformation. This was a great gift to have had that kind of course. When I was taking patristics, to make sure that I did my paper not on a textbook or a summary, but by reading St. Augustine's De Trinitate. These are the ways that we learn the most important ways of thought, how to think, not just knowing data, which is important, but learning how to think with people who are superior to us in their ability to think, the people that you've studied and who have taught the world to this age, even when many of the things that they said have been proven to be incorrect, sometimes in points of fact or in levels of science and so on. You still understand how we get to where we are by having been at these earlier stages, and to appreciate that it was tremendous genius that was able to do what the earlier thinkers did, what Kepler and Copernicus and the other early scientists in physics and the other areas had written was absolutely ingenious. Sure, they were incorrect. Copernicus was flat wrong that the sun is the center of the universe with the earth going around in a circle. It's an ellipse. But he prepared the way for us to understand that it is an elliptical orbit. And you can understand those steps of learning to think by the education you've gotten. Now, I know that you already appreciate what you've done and the great accomplishment. But I want to highlight that as someone who is much older, I'm a lot closer to the end of my life than you are, presumably. And I hope so. I hope that you have a long, long life. But now that I'm in my 70s, it's very much something that I still don't know if it's another 1 year, 10 years, 20 or 30. Probably not more than that. And many people are hoping that it is not another 30 years. I don't know that all my friends could put up with that. But be that as it may, whatever stage it is that you will reach, I can look back in so many ways and pass on to you a couple things that I've said to other graduating classes, and then make some applications for your time. When I was reviewing some of the commencement talks that I've given in the past, I was struck by how much I addressed circumstances of those specific times. And that's important. And even within my life, the problems and the needs that we have to address have changed, and they still are changing. And that's what you have to be alert to. First thing to keep in mind, and this is something that's common to all the graduating classes I have addressed. You are inheriting a mess from the previous generation. And I don't want to hear anybody whine about it. I grew up in a house where it was frequently said, until the whining stopped, stop that whining or I'll give you something to whine about. Now, I won't, of course, but the world will. And it's very important for all of us to realize that we always inherit the messes of the earlier generation. So, for instance, my father grew up in a depression he did not cause. And he fought the Nazis in a war he did not begin. He inherited that problem, and he and his generation had to deal with it. And they built up, after the war, a wonderful life for my generation. But they also did pass on to us the Cold War. And my generation had to deal with the effects of the Cold War. The draft was still going on. We still had to fight in Vietnam. And there were all sorts of mistakes made in that regard. And we inherited a horrible system of Jim Crow and bigotry against African Americans. In my lifetime, we did a lot of work to fix a lot of it, but we have passed on another set of problems to your generation, some of which define your generation, that is to say. And I would say the problems are these. One, we are passing on to you that after we experienced tremendous security growing up, we had no famine, we had no major devastating wars, we had no plague of any kind, and our parents passed on to us increasing wealth. But we used that gift to become very focused on our own dumb approaches, the sexual revolution and the drug revolution. And then in the wake of that, we passed on a lot of relativism. In the generation before mine, there was not a major problem with drugs. In my generation, it became devastating. It was seen as a solution to war and violence. But in fact, it caused more devastation than the Vietnamese War did. More people have died in the drug trade, both as users who are destroyed by the drugs, and by dealers and customers who get shot down. And these problems we passed on. Also, my generation bandied about the idea, I don't need a piece of paper from City Hall to get married. If I love somebody, I'm just going to show that I love them, and I don't want City Hall telling me what to do. It also meant they didn't want God telling them what to do. And as a result, my generation has passed on to you family chaos. When I was born in the 1940s, I'm one of the baby boomers, early baby boomers. My dad came back and he married, and they started having babies, and I was the first in my family. But there were lots and lots of us kids. When I grew up, kids roamed around our neighborhood in herds. Lots and lots of kids to play with. And I didn't know anybody who came from a broken home. There was one boy that I grew up with whose father died when we were 10. But other than that, all the family stuck together. They argued, they had their problems, but they stuck together. And people just didn't know people that were born out of wedlock. When I was born, 4% of children were born out of wedlock. Today, the breakdown of family leads to 52% of all children being born to unmarried parents. And it's not their fault, not the kids' fault. This is the lack of responsibility by their parents. But they also suffer from tremendous poverty. It's the number one cause of poverty. It's the number one situation for people who use various drugs. It's the number one situation in which people are dealing with all sorts of other problems, including criminality. I work in prisons a little bit, and 80 to 85% of the inmates come from homes where the parents are not married to each other. That's reality. Not politically correct, but it's reality. And that has a bigger impact on lives than does the racial background, because it's 80% of the white guys, the black guys, and the Hispanic guys. That's just reality. The other thing that we've passed on is this relativism, and we have a lack of concern for the truth. We don't know that there is a truth. If there is a truth, we don't know that it's discoverable. This is another legacy my generation is passing on to you. And then something that is different than what I have said in the past commencement ceremonies. In many ways, the issue of radical Islam is being addressed much, much better. And that is a fight that is, seems to be going into the background. But my generation had a certain kind of naive optimism in regard to the advantages of making friends with mainland China. And as a result, you are inheriting a world in which the Chinese government, the Communist Party in China, has gained much more power than they had when I was young. They were still starving, and widespread famine was the norm in China. Now they are strong, and they are not only strong for their own people, but they are dominating Africa. They are dominating many areas of technology, and they are becoming extremely dangerous because they want to have control. They combine their focus on the Communist Party, its total control of the state and the army, and the Confucian desire for good order. They bring all of those things together, and they want to bring tremendous control over their own population and over the population of other countries. This is something you are inheriting. And you are obviously a distinctive group with your background. Yeah, no, you're not many. It's okay. It's okay. In fact, most people who end up with the Nobel Prizes come from very small undergraduate schools. There's a study done on that back in the 80s. And this is a very positive thing, that you have this very wonderful education where you have been learning how to think. And as a result of learning how to use your God-given gift of reason, you are also developing the ability to use your free will. And you will be people who love your freedom. You will want success in life, and may you have that. I pray that God blesses you in the future. But keep in mind that you will be sent out by your school because you're done, but also because we're Catholics. We believe that you have a mission to counteract the effects of those who seek comfort in drugs by letting them know that authentic peace can and will come to them if they seek Jesus Christ. And they find peace from the Prince of Peace, and they know that peace that lasts, not one that will destroy their lives with drugs and perhaps make them murderous forces for the enemy of our soul. Secondly, you are being sent into a world of family collapse in order to form families that become models for other families, but also many of you will have opportunities to take in those who are without the background of a family, without a mother or a father that loved them. And you will be sent out to help give them that gift of family that God created in us from the beginning. That we would be fruitful and multiply, that a man and a woman would become one flesh and form family. This will be one of the gifts you need to develop for yourselves with great care and share with the world. And finally, you will have your love of truth and freedom. As you love truth, you will counteract the relativism that permeates our culture and makes people ignorant. And you will stand up for freedom that God has given us. By his death on the cross, he has given us this gift of freedom. By making us in his image and likeness, he gives us the gift of freedom. And whatever challenges our country faces because of the threat of communist China, you will be a people who can tell others freedom is worth having, it's greater than safety, and we will use our gifts to stand up for freedom, fight for it when necessary, and argue for it at every opportunity. May the Lord bless each and one of you, your wonderful families, and may you be blessed with a great future. And I bless you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless you.